the traditional form of education continues to focus on how well you do on a test. So the idea of having experiences and activities becomes less and less important, with an emphasis towards memory, recall, and maybe solving, a problem or two. But it really is unfortunate that we have evolved away from something that where we learn naturally, all the way back to our earliest beginnings. On the hunt, we were always mentored, and shown. It wasn't a drawing on a cave wall. It was going out and actually doing it. We are just now at a new inflection point in our society, where we really need to look at experiential learning in the various forms to really infuse our educational systems, especially with the advent of AI and other changes that have taken place, the level of complexity, how important this is. The process that I've used really centers around the idea that games are not going to just teach you how to do something. The reason why you recall your experience from Monopoly is because you associated a very strong emotion with it. You may have won royally, you may have lost royally. You have maybe wanted to strangle the other person who beat you. Games have a way.
A lot of emotions.
Yes. So that tie to emotion is actually something that happens in the brain and in your, our bodily systems actually react to things. And research has shown that game playing actually activates the same part of the brain as real world.
If AI feels overwhelming, you're not behind. You're just busy running a business. New tools pop up every week, and no one has time to figure out what actually works. At Lion Edge AI, we take AI off your plate so you can focus on running your business. We review your setup, choose the right tools, and run AI systems across sales, customer support, and operations. No noise, no learning curve. Lion Edge AI, your unfair advantage in the AI era.
Imagine meeting a game designer who's never crafted a game for entertainment, yet has revolutionized how we learn through play. Jonathan Estes, our guest today, has spent decades merging education with gaming, creating experiences that teach us more than any textbook ever could. From the thrill of Monopoly to the strategic depths of climate change simulations, Jonathan's work challenges the way we think about learning. Curious about which demographic consistently outsmarts the rest in his games? Stick around to find out. All right, welcome to the show and welcome, Jonathan. Please introduce yourself and
Thank you.
the amazing work that you do. I don't get to meet a game designer every day. In fact, you're the very first time I meet someone in your profession, to be honest.
Great. Well, Elad, it's a pleasure to work with you and to meet with you, and I look forward to our discussion. We had such a great conversation before, and as you mentioned, my game design is actually from an educational background. So I have not created a single game that is used in the traditional entertainment world. I believe that games have a power to change the way we think, learn, and look at systems. So I am personally a gamer all the way back to a young age, my family extensively. And as I entered the field of education, I realized this is a tool that needs to be leveraged more. So yes, I'm looking forward to our next step. And I have had 4 companies in the last 30 years that are centered around how technology and education merge, where that intersection is. And the last iteration really is, in the last 15 years, is focused on building model simulations and games for companies, NGOs, and higher ed.
Excellent. For our audience who probably just like me, don't get to meet someone that carry the title of, game designer and game inventor or game creator like you. Because, I don't know a school that teaches you this profession, right? At least, you don't see it in every school. Maybe there are schools, I don't know. But definitely, this is going to be very interesting conversation because we're going to get into understanding what exactly it means, the process of how you do it. But let's first start. Listen, who doesn't like to play game, right? Everyone, once in their life, they either, like myself, think as far as I remember, Monopoly probably was my first game, right? And then many things, many games afterwards, and it's always a fun. I think I even mentioned it prior to this discussion that I learned from Monopoly things that many decades after. I don't want to say exactly, but I'm still implementing, and those have been rooted back when I was a young age. So I definitely see the benefit. Now, how how about if you can show us or explain to us what exactly it means to learn through gaming? Give us maybe even use cases.
Absolutely. Well, just as a reference point, let's be clear about the concept of experiential learning. It is not new. You asked about how is this trained? Most educators are given instruction about the importance of activities that you learn by doing. The traditional form of education continues to focus on how well you do on a test. So the idea of having experiences and activities becomes less and less important with an emphasis towards memory, recall, and maybe solving, a problem or two. But it really is unfortunate that we have evolved away from something that where we learn naturally, all the way back to our earliest beginnings, on the hunt. We were always mentored, and shown it wasn't a drawing on a cave wall. It was going out and actually doing it. We are just now at a point, a new inflection point in our society where we really need to look at experiential learning in the various forms to really infuse our educational systems, especially with the advent of AI and other changes that have taken place, the level of complexity, how important this is. The process that I've used really centers around the idea that games are not going to just teach you how to do something. The reason why you recall your experience from Monopoly is because you associated a very strong emotion with it. You may have won royally, you may have lost royally. You have maybe wanted to strangle the other person who beat you.
Yeah,
Games have a
emotion, a
way.
lot of emotions.
Yes. So that tie to emotion is actually something that happens in the brain and in your, our bodily systems actually react to things. And research has shown that game playing actually activates the same part of the brain as real world. So if you are experiencing frustration, anger, joy, elation, all of those get associated with your experience. And so you carry that forward in a meaningful way. This is the reason why it's so hard to measure the impact of games as a learning tool is because it's not just recall. It really is around a host of other things that we're learning, such as interaction, communication, strategy, systems thinking, the difference between what happens in 70 years versus what might happen in just, a few minutes, because we are by nature, we're trained to think in very short-term means, and unfortunately, the world operates on long-term states. And so the games bring things into focus in a small state in a small period of time. And so this is why I feel like it's critical now that we understand how to build a game into all of our learning. And the way that I've done this with organizations is it really starts with understanding what the challenge is that's in front of them. This is different than how you traditionally build a course. The course starts with objectives that you want to achieve, skills that you have to accomplish, and then and you're usually measured by a test of whether you remembered it or not. And in games, it's more about understanding what's the challenge in front of you, what's the system in which that challenge takes place, who are the protagonists in that system, what are the components that make it better or worse, such as powers that each role brings to the table, the diversity that's required to make a solution work? What are curveballs that might come in that actually disrupt your success? So, the biggest difference in terms of activities built on games and courses that actually teach you and help you remember is that when you add a story to the mix, you now have the ability to tie it to your real world application. And that's the piece that I felt has been missing all along is how do we really do the transference and that emotion, that experience of putting yourself either in somebody else's shoes or in a scenario or some kind of system and make choices you actually get a better. So one example you asked for, a case example. One game I is actually the first in the company that I formed called Gamavida. The first game that was created was not for a client, but as a demonstration of the power of how games can work. It's called Counselors of Gaia, and it's a climate change game. It was something I care about because I wrote a book around this theme, and I wanted to really leverage the book theme into an experiential game. It's one thing to read about it. It's another thing to actually make decisions and play it. And in this game, you play a world leader and you have a country to take care of. You have to feed the people. You have to grow economically. And you also have to, as you expand, you have to minimize the impact of your growth on climate impacts. And one of those impacts is carbon. So the more carbon that's produced by all the players at the end of every round, there's a track that is increasing. That if you go too far after 9 rounds, you actually can destroy the planet by not reducing that impact. So at the end of every round, all the countries, just like in real world, have to meet and come up with laws to govern themselves while they're also trying to take care of their own country. That sets up this dynamic that makes this game really powerful. And so why the creation of this really matters. It's meant to span 70 years. We as a human race think in terms of quarters. We don't think in terms of 70 years. But these decisions matter, and we need to make decisions that do have those kinds of impacts. So in a 2 to 3 hour game, you're making decisions that span 70 years, have great amounts of agency. You can actually pass laws and you can break them if you want to make your country better. The goal of the game is for you to come out with the greatest number of victory points. Those are earned by numbers of people who are working and not leaving your country. So those metrics fly in the face of growth, economic growth. So you are building industries in this game, trying to prevent a catastrophe at a global scale. And the end result is that most people think very myopically. They're round to round. How can I feed my people? How can I get the most amount of money and get those victory points, ignoring the big picture? And so this game has been played hundreds and hundreds of times in multiple settings. And I asked you this question: out of all those people that have played this game, there's one demographic that actually does the best every time. And
Hold on.
yeah,
Let's give our audience a chance before you spill the answer. Let's ask the question, give the audience 10 seconds to think, and then we'll tell them the answer.
sure.
So
The question is, which demographic, gender and age, really thinks in terms of recreating the system where they feel more cooperative, they are able to think long term and are comfortable with collaborating with the other countries. Those factors really matter in their success.
and I think we also mentioned that there is a clear proof that they perform better than any others, right? Any other demographics,
Yes.
right?
Well, yes, they won every time. And
All
we're,
right,
in
won
most
every
cases,
time.
it's a very difficult game. In most cases, everyone loses. So it's a very difficult game to win.
Right. Okay. So with that, I'm gonna give the audience 5 seconds, and then you're gonna tell us the answer. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. What's the answer?
Middle school girls.
Wow. Wow. Let that sink in for a second. Let that sink in. Middle school girls, not boys, girls, at age of around 12, right?
12, 13, yes.
12, 13, showed over and over again that they are winning the game, like their performance is higher than others in the game that the subject is global change, or what's the right terminology? Would that be the Gaia?
Global cooperation and economic development collectively versus the idea that you have to think completely as a competitor with everyone, because they're keeping both in their minds the idea that we have a world to maintain its stability while also my country's stability. And they go immediately to thinking in terms of my stability means that everybody else is stable also. Where everyone else says, if I'm stable, then I'll figure out everybody else. It was a flip of that attention. So, which is why I believe that, businesses, This was played at the Pentagon. This was played in high schools, universities, professors, all different groups of people, different demographics, and most of them really defaulted to that competitive world and usually would destroy the world in 5 or 6 rounds.
Listen, this is fascinating, and maybe you and I should do a second. I already thinking about a second episode where we're gonna talk about even just that, and the fact that what does it mean? We're not gonna go dive into this in this episode, but just a thought. What does it really mean that these demographics perform so much better than others? There's a lot of in my mind right now. There is a lot of thoughts why they were winning, whether it's the cooperation, the long-term thinking, they put the right priorities in place before, because they are still young and they are still right, and they haven't seen the bad side of life yet, hopefully, and then they're winning, right? So I seriously, I think this could be a subject for an academic research, to say what it means about society. But let's move on. It's
Sure.
fascinating. I got to tell you, just, we are 60 minutes into this episode and I learned already so much, and, my mind cannot stop thinking about what you said. And suddenly it clicked to me what you said. And I just want to emphasize the reason why I remember what I learned, in Monopoly and other games so good is what you said about the link between emotion and the learning stuff. All right. So whether I learn the strategy, whether I learn how I can cooperate with my competitors to maybe get better result, or whatever, the method is. But the fact that it really rooted in my mind is because of it had emotion attached to it, which is way better probably. Now I kind of understand this than if you would, provide me a book and ask me to read it 100 times, right? A boring article, whatever, and I need to memorize it for an exam, and then I forget it, the day after, right?
Right.
But when you have emotion, and I could not think about when I'm playing with my kids, table games, or I see my kids playing with others, the emotions of, yeah, I'm winning or I'm losing, and they might cry because my brother, beat me, or he's cheated. Those emotions that express in the high level of, expression that you can see from like I mentioned, like hardcore crying to laughing, widely, and this is what get you remember. By the way, not only the good, not just the winning, because you learn from losing, maybe even more than you learn from winning.
That is true.
And right, and that, you don't even know that you're learning. And so that's one thing that clicked to my mind. The second thing that I thought about what you do is that you actually provide, and it's not just you, it's like the whole concept of gaming, a safe environment to experience, and that's the experimental part of different approaches, because it's a game, nothing gonna happen, right? You're not gonna really destroy your country, and you can repeat it and repeat it and repeat it, and hopefully you should be better, right? So I knew this conversation was going to be fascinating, and just wanted to share those thoughts with you. I want to go next to ask you to get us a little bit behind the scenes of how you create those games. So let me first ask a question, and I don't know if it makes sense or not. Do you have really any kind of, maybe two type of games? One game is you need to win. The goal is to win, and there is rules. And maybe another game, and I don't, maybe what I'm saying is wrong. I just want to, have you get us behind the scenes. Another game could be practicing. So there's not like really someone win and lose, but there is practicing that create better results. Right? Is that
What you're
true?
talking about are actually stages of development of a game. There are 3 core elements that we bring. One is a model. So creating a model means that you're actually opening the door to seeing what's actually going on, how a system works. So if you're looking at a car engine, you're going to find all these component parts. And if one of them is out of sync, it's going to knock or it's not going to start. But if you are able to understand the whole system of how that engine is actually working, the firing and the cooling and everything else, you've created a model. And it's not a game yet. And you're not simulating anything. You're just simply creating the system as it presently stands. It's very powerful to be able to see that. You might represent it in what we're using the term now, a digital twin, which is we're able to duplicate something in reality in a digital format. And we're able to see the flow of either liquid or energy or something through it. And we do that in society as well with different interactions of different roles we might have in the company. So if something breaks, you can actually see what actually could be affecting that system. The second stage is a simulation. So a simulation means that you're actually now able to practice, as you said, you're able to go through, break something over and over again, and you have to fix it. But you're breaking different sections of that model and you're going back and putting it back together again from scratch. So that practicing and in simulation, I liken it to, the lab rat. You're basically creating the maze and there's cheese at the other end. You go through the maze, you find the cheese, and you can then not have to make the same mistakes over again. You get the cheese. But then if you change the rules, you can make another simulation. The intelligence here is that you're actually, it's still a maze and there's still cheese and there's still a rat, but the circumstances change. So that's where transference takes place. If you learn it here, can you learn it over there? And take it out of the setting. That leads to the third stage, which is scenario building. And scenario building is to me, what this transition that I'm talking about today, experiential learning, it's kind of more the end point. It's the part where you're actually getting the story so that you can embed the learning that's unique to you. So you're getting not just the rat and the cheese, but it's in the context of survival of a community. You need to get the cheese so that your community can survive, or you have an experience that needs to be what I call a hero's journey. You have a calling to make a change. You have a trial that you have to go through, that prevents you from progressing. You make it through the trial. You have a guide who's going to guide you now, a wise one who's going to give you the advice. And then you come back and fulfill your return. That part of the scenario is the component that really embeds what makes a good game, is the ability to embed the story into your life, and the transfer can take place from that back out into real world. And from a nuts and bolts standpoint, it gets, into fine details for each one. But those are the three core that we bring. And we consider game building at the next level would be world building. So what you're doing now is, how does this contextualize within an economic system or within an agricultural system, or if you want to create a regenerative agriculture program for food sovereignty. All these fancy words are really, systems thinking. And the only way to learn them is to simulate, create a model, simulate, and create scenarios for you to experience them. And the takeaway is embedded behavior change and ability to adapt to systems as they adapt. So you're not just a one-off test taker on rats and cheese.
Well, yeah, that's exactly, and this is your process that you go through and do your research.
Yes.
Then, right? So let's talk about the outcome. So we all understand the outcome would be something physically printed most of the time, right? Like maybe cards or a board,
Well, yeah,
right?
let's talk about games. We can talk
Yeah.
about a physical, what we call tabletop gaming, or, analog games, which we're in a renaissance for that now. There are literally 900 games a year being released at, annually, that would be on a commercial level. And it's explosive. It comes out of Europe and now out of the US. Um, Multiple games on economics, on warfare, on all different kinds of topics. Now it's a lot on systems related to agriculture and creating a circular economy and all these other things. But the other type of games, as we all know, are video games. So digital gaming has been around since the early 70s, I guess, from Pong on. we have, the experience of being able to visualize, even with virtual reality, whole worlds and be able to walk in them, communicate, and interact. So I build both. I usually start with analog games because game mechanics are difficult to perfect and we need to constantly be testing. And so if we're to go from towards a digital game, it would be based on practice we've done in analog form first. But yeah, in analog forms, there's RPGs, which are called role playing games. I play Dungeons and Dragons, for example. There are card games like Magic the Gathering, other typical card games, and then board games. So it runs the gamut. And we build all of them depending on the scenario for the need of the challenge for the organization we're talking to.
Amazing. One of the things that, at least for myself, is very appealing is the fact that you can create something, and you create something, whether service, product, that brings value to your clients or to everyone, to your users, right? And I told you ever since I met you that I cannot stop thinking about about what you do, because it's a relatively, let's put it this way, the production is relatively simple these days, and we're going to talk about how AI helps with that. You need to know what you're doing, for sure, and that's why you have experts like you. But um, you can create something that brings value and some financial rewards that is relatively easy. Let's say, comparing if you want to open a restaurant as the other extreme, right? And being creative and creating things like that, that whoever uses them learn something right out of it. So it's entertainment and learning at the same time. It's something that, to me, is very appealing. And you know, I I thought about something, ever since I met you, is that one of the things that our education system, is lacking today is teaching the kids life skills. So our system is, it's the same as it was almost with my grandparents, with some nuances changes, but not a lot change. It's still, class and a teacher, and there's one modality how the teacher teaches the kids, the subject. It's almost the same. Yes, there is nuances today that kids can do different, but what what I'm thinking, and I wonder what you think about it, is through games we can teach the kids without even they know that they are learning something. They're just enjoying the game part of it, about financial education, communication, right, in society. And we know that these are things that super important today with, with the time that kids spend, with screens and not with human beings. Health education, whatever, right? You name it. Not the typical things that they learn at school, at least the mainstream, right? There is special schools I know in the country that do that. But as a general idea, we can supplement the education at school through games, and the kids can learn a lot about those things as part of the school services, right? But it can be done after hours. The school just guide them. Oh, this is a good game. You guys, go play it. And do you think that's something that can, that can maybe catch some attention?
I definitely think so. I mean, I know of many school systems that do include games, especially video games for math and for science and things like that. What I find the value of games beyond just the skills and learning, the numbers and things like that, is applying them for emotional development. So the ability to make a decision and it not working out and losing. So I think that in that case, it doesn't even matter what the content of the game is, except that it's appropriate for that age group. It's really about failing fast, experiencing losing and winning with integrity and grace. And those are some of the best lessons you can learn, in terms of life skill development. So I absolutely believe that. I just feel that we don't have enough in our curriculum that fosters that. And One thing I'll mention, you had mentioned it earlier on about the ubiquity of games now. We really live in an age right now that close to two generations, over a billion young people have played games more than they've been in school. So it's actually an opportunity. Most of those are entertainment games. I'd say 98% of them are entertainment based games. I think that the traditional thought is they're wasting their time. It's a distraction that they shouldn't be doing. And yet there's a possibility that they're actually rewiring their brain to think in a complex world. And we need to harness that. We need to be aware that that is what's required in a complex world like this, is to take on multivariate problems and solve them. About 10 years ago, there was an attempt from a pharmaceutical company to understand how folding technology works in mathematics for an HIV/AIDS drug. And where computers couldn't really solve the problem at the level it needed to be solved, a gaming company approached them and said, you should make this available for people to play and you'd solve it faster. And so they gave them the problem and they designed a video game called Fold It. In this game, you had to create like an origami, but it was in thousands of folds. And in 2 weeks and 200,000 players later, they solved it.
Wow.
So collectively. And most of the players were young people. You had 12-year-olds, or younger actually playing this game because it became a puzzle, a challenge.
Yeah.
And the desire to win, let's go back to that idea too. I believe that the desire to win is a natural component of our life. And winning can take different forms, obviously. Beating your opponent is in sports and everything is a motivator for you to actually achieve more. So we can also test ourselves. We can test against a computer. We can test against others. Competition is a strength. Cooperation is a tool we can use in a competitive world. So there's not a war between competition and cooperation in games. It's really about what tools do I have available to get the best outcome at any one moment. And to be able to come up with that decision, to me, is the strength that we need to foster. And if you've ever played a young person Magic the Gathering, an 8-year-old can knock your socks off. It doesn't matter how long you've played. They learn faster, and this is their world. And I think we need to bring more games into the picture so that we can foster this problem-solving mentality to the problems that we have in front of us.
Absolutely. And I can tell you firsthand, seeing my younger son, they meet at least once a week. And they play this game. I won't name it because I don't think it's appropriate, but it's a it's a game. Think about it this way: that you need to find who's the thief. Someone get the
Oh,
role
yeah,
of a thief.
I'm familiar with that.
I'm sure, and then you don't. And then as a collective, they need to, through the game rule, they need to find, and the winner is the one who actually make the right decision. So, the concept is very familiar, but I can see, first of all, the fact that Gen Z, right? Those kids that were born into the internet, now they have AI for like 3 years and they still like to get together and put those cards on the table and play. That's amazing. I mean, I think that means something. They had enough from digital. They want the human relationship. They want the human interaction. The second thing is that, again, emotion. When they play here, I'm on the second floor in my office, and I hear them screaming, like at some point, like, what's going on? And it's just a scream of either, we talked about it, right? Whether, I win, I lost, and they're like so excited. Now, this game is not so much about learning. It's like technically entertainment. But I'm not an expert, but I'm sure that you still learn life skills in a way, right? So it's not designed to teach you anything. It's really entertainment. But the fact that even the fact that you just, because I see some of the kids are shy, some of the kids are more active. It forces you to sit together around a table, ordering pizza, having fun. So it's a development of maybe social skills, right? Through the game, right? So definitely, I think that the opportunity, as you mentioned, and I'm not aware of this. I wasn't aware of the statistic that you just provided about how many people play. I think it's maybe the renaissance time of the games as a mean to in the educational space, and especially where something has to be changed. We all understand that we cannot still go the same old, system that our grandparents used to do. And something has to be changed. And this could be one of the things that changes. I got to tell you one more thing is that there's so many things that I would like to ask you, but we are limited in time. So we probably want to meet again. And one of the things that I would like to pick up your brain and actually go inside your brain is how do you, when you design a game, how are you going to design it? Is it going to be, like maybe cards versus a board versus, some random? Is there a random factor? All those things. But let's have the audience a reason to follow us and stay, because I think that's going to be a great topic for another episode with you.
Yes. Well, also the connection to AI, because that is the next evolution.
Exactly. And now let's talk. So exactly. And that's the next question that I'd like you to shed some light on is you've been doing this for many, many years, and something has changed ever since ChatGPT was introduced to the world, right? And now when you look at yourself, the way that you do things, the way that you design games and create games today versus, let's say, 2 years ago, right? Tell us about what changed.
Sure. Well, normally my process is like a consulting service. So that takes time and a lot of people to pull off. So if I'm contracted with a large corporation or an NGO to build, in this case, might be a training game like onboarding or team building or something like that that's specific to their industry. The process of collecting the information to understand their system, to look at the objectives they want to achieve, and then all the things I mentioned earlier, there's 12 questions that I ask that I have to go deep into understanding the framework in which this is taking place. Um, these are not inexpensive and short-term projects. They take anywhere from 6 months to a year to pull off, hundreds of thousands of dollars to actually implement. Lots of testing in between and everything else. So I've only built 22 games in 15 years. So that, in my mind, I feel like I should have built 200 games. But and I look back, each one was so labor intensive to pull off. So, and the other thing is that a lot of the corporations, I would say all of the corporations and all the companies did not duplicate the effort. It was because of the time, because of the cost, it became prohibitive. So I was constantly having to sell. They even believed that it was better than their traditional form of learning, but the bottom line still drove their business. They still will default to, a computer generated talking head with a computer script, you know, and, um, you know, save all the money. But when you come down to the learning outcome, you're not going to get anywhere near what we can provide in terms of that understanding. So along comes ChatGPT, and 1 month after that release, I looked at all of those 22 proposals and I thought, these are prompts. I need to just drop that proposal in and see what ChatGPT comes. And I said, build a game from a perspective of a game designer to solve this business problem. And do you know that it came back in 10 seconds with close to 90% of what I built
Wow.
for those proposals? And I was thinking, this is either the end of my business or the beginning of my business. And I decided that it was the beginning because I've always been wishing that there was a way to make games more accessible, game design to be easy. We have an example out there in the business world, Canva, where if anybody tries to create a graphic that looks anything professional, it either costs you a lot to hire someone or you have to learn a very complicated program to do it. Canva made it possible for anybody to basically create a graphic or brand yourself or whatever it might be, and leveraged heavily by AI assistants. And likewise, game design for education can be done the same way. I have thought that, do we create a tool, an AI tool that builds games? It's kind of like, do we, you know, create a tool that can, create a new form of energy? It's like, it's too big. We can't boil the ocean. So let's focus on something else that really makes a difference. And so what I've used AI for is a tool to augment our ability to create new worlds in a faster, less expensive, and extremely meaningful. So we can create models, we can create simulations, and we can create games now in a fraction of the time and iterate those much more rapidly. I tested this theory most recently with 4 organizations where I've offered my services leveraged by AI to solve a problem that they have within their organization. My question usually is, among the people that you're training, what's their greatest challenge that they don't get, that they don't understand when it does not translate well back into real world? They usually have something like that, some concept. If you are familiar with agile development, for example,
Absolutely.
um, agile is a very difficult thing to teach someone who is used to waterfall
Wonderful.
programming.
Yeah.
So there are 2 different paradigms. One of them says, give me the specs and I'll get back with you in 6 months and show you what I've done. But the specs have to be good. The other one says, give me your specs and let's meet every week and we'll iterate together on the changes and we'll fail fast to figure out what actually works, what you really want. Much more superior, much more rapid, but the mindset and the requirements as an individual to engage in that is a big culture shift. So we created a game called Mission to Mars, that where you actually have to build a rocket with a minimum viable product, an engine, an air supply, and a rocket ship. And you're hired by a company and they tell you, we want the nose to be red and have a big fin in the back. And you get bonus points beyond your minimum viable product. And you compete with other companies building the same thing. So when they play this game, clicks. In 2 hours, they understand the value of all the elements that make sprints and objectives that meet this agile requirement to actually function within their work. So where this leads, in my mind, is that we're able to now with AI be a forge for development that is rapid, trainable, and duplicable in multiple settings and make it as part of our learning practices in K through 12, in higher ed, and in corporate settings. And now I'm looking at it, as you mentioned earlier, it becomes a strategic planning tool, a life planning tool, a tool for recruitment. If you want to know if someone is the right fit for your job, they can play within one of these scenarios to see if culturally they'll be able to match. It's a it's a new world. It basically creates an opportunity for us to practice in arenas in ways that we have never done before.
You touched a point that it's close to my heart because my background is engineering and agile and waterfall is something that I know very well. And I really want to, even though it might take us more than I planned, in this episode, but it's very curious if you can get us a little bit into the game design about this specific topic that you created. Because I got to tell you something. I can see myself when I used to manage several teams, and I can see over lunch I would buy them pizza, and I buy the game, right? I'll provide them the game, I purchased from you, and I let them play, and we can have a 2 hours lunch break, all right? Maybe twice a month, right? And I can see the value. Because and I saw it firsthand, one of the big challenges when Agile became popular is that it was hard to educate top management sometimes, right? But also engineers that used to be waterfall and used to, what do you mean, start developing before I know everything to the end, right? What do you mean? I need to know everything, every little, detail. No. And then Agile come and says, no. You only plan for the next 2 weeks, the sprint, right? And then
Right.
reassess, right? So it was hard for them, just like you mentioned, the culture shift. And what I want to ask you is, tell us a little bit about the game. Was that you had in this game in order to win? Was that designed so that if you choose more of the agile approach, it increases your chances to win versus a traditional waterfall? Or how do you
No,
educate?
in this
Okay,
case, it was a course conversion to a pure agile approach. So the moment you start, but see, we used a theme like building a rocket to go to Mars in kind of a fun way as a theme that takes them out of their current work scenario. So they're able to apply this way of thinking in a fantasy world. So it's really representative. But I can tell you that the instructor was very knowledgeable about Agile, but his course was 3 days long, 700 slides. He just killed them by PowerPoint, so
Yes. Yes.
there was no interactivity. The end result was people leaving and not really adopting. And so it did not transfer. By replacing 700 slides with a game that takes about 2 hours to play, they play it 3 times with a little bit of introduction and debriefing. They're able to capture the idea and actually get excited about it and wanting to take those ideas immediately back to their own workplace. The premise of the game is that you play as a team and you work cooperatively, but you're competing against other teams. It can be played with a group. It would be considered a cooperative game if it's a small group. It's competitive if you're competing against other groups. You get a lot of benefit from that competition because we had a leaderboard that would every round say where everybody was at in terms of their progress. You win by experience points or victory points. And what's critical is you gain victory points by getting to the launches. So those minimum viable products, you have to build a portion of the rocket and test your rocket by the third round. And if you don't get those bonus points. You're delayed. That delay costs you. You can recover, but it's really difficult. So when you're making your decisions, there are many things you can do. You have choices to fulfill the customer requirements on your card that you're given, like making the rocket ship have logos and have fins and go faster. But those aren't minimum viable products. So really what you're teaching everyone to know is get your basics done first, but keep an eye on your client's requests also. Those extra requests will give you more points. So you've tried to fit them in along with everything else. The team actually gets to choose their players, the representative, like an engineer, a rocket scientist, and someone who understands math and does trajectories, and a life support expert. So every round you get to swap out your staff and get other staff in there. You get to you gain additional skills through achieving your goals. You actually get more ability to have, there's a chance for everything. I can't get into the exact details, but there's a rolling of the dice to make sure that you actually are able to succeed in your project. And so choosing the right people really matters. Deciding your sprint order really matters. So you have to put in order the projects that you're working on for your rocket in the right order. And so a lot of discussion goes on in those groups. They collaborate a lot and they have to make sure that they're touching base with their client at the end of every sprint to make sure they're meeting their needs. So we make it dramatic. When there's a launch, we kind of have a graphic and a sound effect, and we put on the leaderboard all the teams that launched, and those that don't, you kind of get this wah wah kind of sound
Yeah.
because you did not fulfill that requirement. And when you have a winner at the end that actually makes it to Mars and lands, company gives them this great reward, and they have this song for them, and so anyway, that emotion and the story embeds the whole idea, and the competition creates this team like environment where they want to play it again. I said, you won this time, but we can get you next time because now we can see what we have to do. It's it's played now nationally, hundreds of locations. So it's used as a training tool for new and refresher versions of Agile. It could be adapted for Kanban and for all the other different flavors if needed. So the main thing is that it can be done as an individual small group, like you said, at a coffee shop, or it could be done as a event style where you're taking a whole group, let's say 20 to 40 people through the process together and competing. In that short amount of time, you get people who are bought in.
You know, it's a shame that, I've been in this industry for at least couple of decades, and I've been into multiple corporations, and I don't think that even once this method was tried, like that I got experience with it. Um, and I really think it's a shame, because I think had we experienced this type of experimental learning, uh, We could have probably even done better.
Yeah. Well, look at cybersecurity training.
Yeah.
How many breaches have we experienced in office because the training is usually a refresher course that takes a couple hours. You read a text, you listen to a speaker, and you take a test, and you're qualified now. We're safe. Well, I can guarantee you we are not safe unless you have practiced, unless you can see it and have something thrown at you multiple times in a red team, blue team environment. You really need to experience being attacked and defending yourself. And likewise, recognize what those threats are. And that could be done very easily, 5 or 6 minutes a day practicing, so
All right.
it's, yeah.
Before I move to the next question that I'd like to get your idea, there's one thing that I have to understand. When you design a game, and maybe if you can, spare some time just explaining us, when you design a game, let's again talk about the Agile game or the Mission to Mars game, right? There is a random component for almost every game, correct?
Yes.
Right? Whether it's rolling the dice or picking a card, because we need to do some simulation. So I get that. But is it true that when you design the game, if they follow the method that you are trying to teach, the higher the success to win?
Yes. But we don't spell it out to them. So they follow the rules, but that's not the strategy. The rules are meant to be you can do this, but you can't do this. And so here are your components, here's your decisions, and here's your goal in the long run to be your goal in the game is to win, but here are the tools that you have available to you. Some games require a lot of building, like preparing, getting technology together to get a contraption that is better than somebody else's contraption. You might be preparing for an eventual crisis. So you have a lot of preparation to do around that eventual crisis, and you hope that what you've developed is going to withstand it. So the process of development of the game, that we spend most of the time really understanding the system and who are the protagonists within that system and what are the drivers that make it work. Lots of effort on the model. The simulation is the testing. Can we break that model? And if so, where are the points where it gets broken? If you do something over and over again, can you always win? Or you do something over and over again, do you always lose? It's called game balancing. So once we have that, then we can put a skin on that. We can say, let's put this in a world that's a little bit off from where they are currently. Let's say they're all programmers, they're all engineers. Let's make them rocket scientists in this setting. In other cases, we are immersed right within, we duplicate and create a digital twin of the setting they're working in. In one game we created called Maternity Clinic, we decided that the team building between the nurse, the midwife, and the doctor needed to match exactly their life experience in the clinic. So we created a simulation of a day in a clinic where you had 50 patients that were going to birth a baby to come in, and you had to triage them over that course of the day. And there were going to be 8 or 9 different curveballs that were thrown at you to prevent you from being successful. The issue at stake was not treating patients. It was how well does that group communicate and triage? Because the problem that needed to be solved was doctors were making all the decisions and not asking help from midwives and nurses who really knew a lot more about the nuances that in a birth. And the doctor knew the technical but didn't know the emotional, or in some cases the remedy for a particular situation. And patients would die, or there would be comorbidities, or something would happen. So the game mimicked that. And in some cases that makes more sense, that it's immersed in real world. In other cases, we create simulated worlds. But in all cases, we do this choosing of game mechanics that give you agency, that make it feel like your decisions matter. It's not a black box. It's not a roll of a dice. We don't build Candyland, where land on a square, you go back to the beginning. You
Yeah.
fell in the mud pit. Sorry, you got to go back to the beginning. That is, our games are open ended. They're open worlds. you can make your own mistakes. You can get sent back to the beginning, but it's because of the decisions that you make. And so, because of
And
this renaissance of board gaming and video games that we've experienced over the last 20 years, there are over 200 game mechanics that we can draw from. And finding the right mix that convey the experience well is really the challenge. And this is where the augmented AI really is shortening the time. And I will mention one thing in this development process that I've discovered is that AI can mimic my players. So in the playtesting of the games, I will create profiles of the target audience in detail, age, gender, experience, role, and say I need that person to play with 4 other players, have them play this game 50 times. And I need a report back to tell me how did they like it, what broke, what worked, what didn't. You know, that comes back in a few seconds with a complete report and shows where the game is broken and where it needs to be fixed. So,
wow.
and a full analysis to say, it's really stronger for managers and less strong for rank and file engineers or workers or whoever it might be. If you add this component, it makes it meaningful for all of them. So it gives me insights that I never thought would be possible. I would spend literally tens of thousands of dollars for that kind of game mechanic testing and advice to get that kind of feedback.
This is fascinating. So to summarize this part, ever since, the whole AI technology was introduced and became useful for you, you were able to reduce the time and cost of inventing and creating the game, but then also it does like a testing for you, right? And it can simulate players, which this is blow my mind what you just said. I just learned this is something that I didn't know up until this moment, and it just blows my mind. And I tell you what, even if the fact that the AI can simulate testing and give you a report. Now, even if it's not, we don't know exactly what happened in the black box of the AI brain, right? But if the outcome is that it found actually potential pitfall or potential things that where the game is broken, and then you improve it by changing the rules, that means that it's working. So I don't know if it really runs simulations and how well it represents the role that you gave it, right? Because it's done in the background, and then it suddenly you have a, you know what? I don't care. It's I'm assuming it's true, but I have, you just mentioned that the report actually tells you, hey, you have a problem here when you fix it.
Yes.
And that can be quantified in times and money very easily because you've been there, you've done that. And this is fascinating. All right. We are getting, okay, to the top of the hour. And the last question I'd like to, ask you and get your idea. Let's put it this way. Let's go back a little bit to, not go back, but let's go to the operational side of AI in business, right? At the end of the day, you're a business, very inspirational, very creative, but it's a business. And there are ways that AI can also help you in running the business, whether it's sales, customer support, maybe, and other things. Do you use any of those tools today? And if you don't, what do you think, or what would you like to use AI to solve any kind of challenges or to get you to the next level where you want to be that you can think of?
Sure. No, I think any business owner who doesn't ask the question, given where I'm at with my business now, what are some potential markets I could expand in? How do I increase my chances for, being relevant to my target audience and increase my bottom line, So I use that with a variety of different prompts. I think the strategy of moving away from wanting to create a kind of centralized AI tool that I license to people to use was something that actually AI told me as advice, saying, in this kind of environment, it's better to be a consulting service and lower your cost, but bring your expertise to the forefront and empower others to basically license your method so that they can do the same thing as consultants and build your network that way. So I would say that most of the new business ideas, the new ways of marketing, and seeing around the corner of things I didn't know that I could possibly do are now coming from that source. And it's saved me an enormous amount of time and, unnecessary testing and go a full year going the wrong direction. And it's expensive to build a new product. And as you can see, the valuations and the cost of building new AI tools is in the hundreds of millions, to stand out and be, in a world where there's 90 new AI tools being released every day. Can't compete in that world, but I can compete with what I know. And I can leverage AI to be a power tool for something that I believe is an evolution that is necessary right now. So for me, it's a mission to bring experiential learning into everyday life. Rather than say, I need to strategize my next 3 months, I want to change the word to I need to play my next 3 months. And I'm now using a new word. I need to rehearse my next 3 months. And by rehearsing, I'm able to make the failures in safe environment in shorter amounts of time before I actually implement. And it's helping my business tremendously. It allows me to plan and strategize and um, not and hopefully not miss opportunities. Um, so I would say it's essential now.
Beautiful. And what's your favorite model? Is that, ChatGPT, Google, Gemini, Claude? What's your favorite?
It's the same thing with kind of like what happened with Microsoft Word. Once I got it, I can't really divert. I'm not into I have a hard time with learning curves, and I like the model of ChatGPT and the way it gives the information back to me. But I am using 4 or 5 other tools as kind of the next step. So I've discovered the use of Supercool as an example for some of the creative work that I'm doing. So, and there are, a couple others that give me that creative element as well. But ChatGPT does a good job with most of what I need. And now that it's got, 5.2 gives me a lot more flexibility with the graphics. I can prototype a game basically in one prompt. So where before it took me many iterations and I had to go to other tools to get the other pieces. Now my prompt is probably around 1,000 words, and it gives me back the product that I need to start practicing.
Beautiful. Jonathan, this was not just a pleasure. It was very educational. You don't get to meet someone who does what you do, like like I mentioned in the beginning, every day. You're an artist at the end of the day. Writing, in my mind, designing games, it's a kind of an art because you need to find a way to convey whatever the message is. And we haven't talked about so many other use cases that I know that you did, but I'm leaving something for our next meeting. It's a kind of an art to how do you design it in such a way that it entertainment, you like it, right? You want to play it again because you want to be better, but also, on the way that it teaches you whatever the goal is. I want to thank you so much for the time, and hopefully I'll see you again this year.
Yes, absolutely. Invite me back anytime.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If AI feels overwhelming, you're not behind. You're just busy running a business. New tools pop up every week and no one has time to figure out what actually works. At Lion Edge AI, we take AI off your plate so you can focus on running your business. We review your setup, choose the right tools, and run AI systems across sales, customer support, and operations. No noise, no learning curve. Lion Edge AI, your unfair advantage in the AI era.